Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and today we're going to replace the back glass on the iPhone 8 Plus. For this video, we're going to use the one that has the camera lens attached to it, not the one without the camera lens. So the tools we're going to need are going to be a PH000 Bit, a P2 driver, a Y000 Bit, a razor blade, a plastic pick, an Xacto knife, which I'll have in the description, and possibly a playing card. You will also need some heat, glue, and some clamps. I also recommend using a magnetic mat so you can put all the screws on there because you don't want to lose those. And you should always have some protective gear. What I recommend is using glasses like these, as well as a heat and cut resistant glove like this. And what we're going to do is grab the P2 driver and we're going to remove the bottom two screws. Then we're going to use a blade and a pick to get under the screen right here and separate it from the phone. If this is difficult for you to do, I definitely don't recommend doing this repair because it's going to get a lot worse as time goes on. So once we have the screen lifted up and over to the right side, we're going to grab the PH000 Bit and we're going to remove these 4 screws as well as that metal panel. Then what we're going to do is unplug the battery as well as those 2 cables that have the screen and the home button cable. Next we're going to grab the Y000 Bit, remove these 2 screws at the top, and remove this little panel and unplug the screen right there. For the rest of the video, it is going to be a teardown, so once you take out everything, you will be able to remove the back. But until then, I'll explain everything you should do and at what time. So we're going to grab the PH000 Bit, remove this screw right here, remove these 2 screws up here as well as this metal panel, and we're going to remove all these screws up here that hold down the little antenna. Once those screws are out, this thing will just lift up like this, and then we're going to have 3 other screws that we need to remove. This one right here. There's this little metal piece that goes a certain way. Make sure to keep that in place, and make sure to keep these screws in order, obviously. Next, we're going to grab the Y000 Bit and remove these 2 screws, and then we're going to remove this metal panel. If this metal panel has a little anchor on there, all you got to do is just push down like this, and you can remove that screw. Then just remember to keep that little anchor in that area. For now, I'm going to tighten it, but we're going to take it out in a few seconds. So what you want to do is unplug this little antenna right here and lift it up just a little bit so you can see that anchor screw. And then if you have one, grab the standoff bit and remove that screw. Remove this screw right here and remove this other screw right here. If any of the screws get stuck in there, it kind of can just fall out like this, but sometimes it does get difficult. Once the screws are removed, what we can do is we can remove this SIM card tray right here. And then we can start unplugging these cables, as well as the camera cables and this top left cable. Then we can use this little area right here to lift up the logic board, and it should come out like this. Our next step is removing these speakers, which are going to require the PH000 Bit. We're going to remove all of these PH000 screws that we can see. And then grab the Y000 Bit, remove that 1 screw, as well as this little panel right here. Next, what you want to do is unplug this little antenna right here, fold it over like this, and then there's a little anchor screw that we can remove right here. Now using that pick, we can unplug the Taptic engine, and it should lift out very easily. The next thing you want to do is lift up the speaker, which kind of just falls out like this. Not too bad. Then there's going to be 2 PH000 screws at the very bottom of the charging port. You want to remove those 2 screws, and then we can start removing the port. So peel up the adhesive on the top like this. Be very careful, make sure not to tear the cable, and you should be able to just lift it up kind of like this. Feel free to add some heat if you want to. I just use a pick to cut through the rest of the adhesive, but it should come out fairly easily. And then once you get towards the microphones, you want to kind of lift it out like this. You don't want to keep those plastic pieces in there because they might melt once we start heating it up. Again, be careful because this cable is very easy to tear. But with some maneuvering, you should be able to remove that fairly easily. Next thing we're going to do is try to remove the battery. And what I recommend doing is using this pick to kind of lift up the little peel tab so you can pull off the adhesive. And all you got to do is just carefully pull this up. Sometimes it tears, other times you can kind of recover it. And then do the same thing on the other side as well. and that came out fairly easily. And then you want to do the same thing on the bottom, but just in case you tear all of these, I'll show you how easy it is to lift up the battery. All you got to do is heat up the areas where the pull tab's ripped, and they just kind of come out like this. If the battery bends a little bit, don't really worry too much about it. Just make sure not to bend it in half, or else you could cause some issues. Now that we have the battery out, we can remove this top area, which is going to be PH000 Bit for these two screws up here. And then you can remove this metal panel that covers the cameras. Next, we can remove this screw up here, which is a PH000 Bit. And then you can remove this little metal panel. Next, what we're going to do is just remove the cameras. Just carefully remove it like this. Make sure not to tear that cable, obviously. And for the camera flash and the microphone, you want to lift it up like this, so then you can get a hold of that little plastic piece. And then we're just going to pull it back like this. Carefully remove this because you don't want to tear the cable. And if you need to, feel free to add a little bit of heat, but remember it is plastic, so don't add too much heat. So we're going to fold it over like this, and we're going to make sure that little plastic piece is out. Then we're also going to make sure this little microphone cover is out. And what I'm going to do is just put it on the back glass just so I don't lose it. Now you can remove the power and volume buttons, but for this situation, I'm just going to fold these over like this. Put some heat resistant tape under and over these little components. And then we're going to remove the last piece, which is the wireless charging piece. This may be a little bit difficult to remove, but remember the glass is being replaced, so if you scratch it a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. But you do want to make sure you get under the coil when you are lifting this up. This coil can bend a little bit, but try and make sure that it stays pretty flat, and you shouldn't really run into too many issues. Now that we have everything set up, we're going to move all the parts over to the side, and we're going to grab our protective glasses and our UV glove so then we don't burn our hands. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a decent amount of heat just to kind of get a base so then this thing gets warm. This phone will get really hot, so make sure the UV glove is the only thing touching this phone and not your other hand. And pretty much what we're going to do is get a decent amount of heat on the phone. Make sure not to melt the plastic because that could happen. But this phone is pretty resilient to the heat, so you don't really have to worry too much. But still, don't add heat for longer than 15 seconds. Once we get a decent amount of heat on one side, what we're going to do is get the razor blade and we're going to kind of pick out the glass like this. It is going to be difficult for a little bit of time, but what we're going to do is just get enough area in there so then we can get the Xacto knife to cut through it really easily. Now in the beginning it may be a little bit difficult with this Xacto knife, but once this gets a lot of heat and the rest of the device is pretty hot, it's going to be very easy to lift up the glass with this. But all you're going to do is just apply heat and go back to using that Xacto knife and cut through the adhesive area, making sure to dodge through all the little holes and making sure to stay away from the plastic on the edges. Like I said, make sure to have those safety glasses on because flying glass is not the best thing ever. And it's up to you if you want to keep the wireless charging area open or not, but what I found is it makes it a little bit easier to remove the glass if you break out the little wireless charging area like I did. And pretty much for the rest of this video we're going to be doing the same thing, just heating up and picking at the glass with this Xacto knife. So feel free to either continue watching this or fast forward to the time that I have posted right now. Just remember every once in a while to clean up your area so then you don't get glass stuck into bad places or on your hand or anything like that. So we're close to the edge, there's just a little bit left. And now that we're at the camera area, this piece actually fell out. So that's why it makes it a little bit easier for the camera to be replaced. There's this little metal piece that's almost welded in there. What you want to do is just kind of pull it out like this. And it should just kind of break off because it is fragile metal. For some reason, I had some difficulty removing that, but it'll eventually fall out. And then this little metal piece that's hanging off, you want to make sure to kind of bend that out. So then there's just those 2 screw holes right there. Next, what we're going to do is clean up the back and get rid of all the glue and make everything look pretty nice. I generally do this under the microscope because it makes it easier for me to see, but all you want to do is just make sure everything is perfectly flat on the edges, because this glass is really flat and you don't want certain places lifting up. Next thing you want to do is place a glass on there, just make sure it fits perfectly, and that way you can see if there's going to be any issues or not. If everything looks good, what I recommend is using the screen on the front of the phone and put it into the frame. That way you have some leverage when you apply the clamps. But what we're going to do with the glue is we're going to apply a thin layer around the edge, and then we're going to apply a decent amount on the middle. Feel free to copy what I do. Just remember to use this type of glue, or else you may run into some issues. Then all you got to do is just place the back on there. And what I recommend doing is pushing up against one edge, put a clamp on there, push against another edge, put a clamp on there, push against another edge, and keep doing that until you get clamps pretty much everywhere around the device. I like to apply a lot of clamps, but sometimes if you apply too many, they will kind of push into the middle and you might have some issues there, like I am now. But either way, what you want to do is apply the clamps and let them sit for a couple hours. I recommend letting it sit for at least 3 to 4 hours. But the longer the better. If you can leave it overnight, that's probably going to be perfect. Don't worry about the glue because the glue is very easy to remove if there is some excess glue on the edges. All you got to do is just get either a pick or even your fingernail and it should come out fairly easily. Next, what we're going to do is grab that pick and lift up the screen, and be very careful because sometimes the cables will stick to the phone, but in this case they're pretty good, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Next, we're going to grab all the parts and start putting it back together. So I'm going to remove this tape right here, as well as this other tape right here. And then we're going to clean up the little flash area, and we're going to fold this little piece right here. Remember, the plastic piece is attached to this, so if you moved yours, make sure to move it over to this one. And it kind of lines up. It's not going to sit down there perfectly until we put this little metal piece, which is what we're going to do right now. And then what I like to do is put the charging port in the bottom first. Make sure everything's all lined up properly, and then apply all the screws that go into there. Then we'll put the wireless charging panel right there, and continue putting the rest of the charging port area back in there. For all these screws, I'm going to be using the PH000 Bit. Except for this one screw on the right side of the Taptic engine, which requires the standoff bit. Then we can put the speaker back in. It should fit in fine if you just push it down on the bottom, but for some reason I was having some difficulty, but that's because the microphone wasn't lined up properly. Once everything's lined up, you can put those 3 screws on there, and we can plug in this little antenna. Then we can set this down right here, grab this little metal cover, put those bottom 2 screws in with the PH000 bit, and then we can put that top screw in with the Y000 bit. Now that that charging port area is done, we can put in the logic board, starting with the top portion right here, and then set down the bottom portion. Then grab the PH000 bit, put in the screw right here and this other screw right here, and then you should be able to fit the SIM card in. If the SIM card fits fine, then we can continue with the rest of this. So we're going to put these two screws in this little antenna thing right there, and then we're going to grab this other antenna and we're going to put in all those screws there. Next we can plug in the power button cable, put this little metal panel on there, as well as those two screws. Next we're going to put the camera in, make sure that the little camera area is clean. If it's not clean, what you can do is use compressed air to get rid of all the dust that's in there. And sometimes use a Q-tip and some alcohol to clean the little lenses. But once everything looks good, we can put the camera in and continue putting the phone back together. Now that the camera's in, we can put this little metal piece over here, put the top left screw in. Then we can grab that anchor screw, put it in right here, and then put the other one in that camera area. It is not magnetic, so it may be very difficult to put it back in, but eventually you'll get it back in. Then we can put that other anchor screw right under it, as well as the anchor screw on the bottom of the logic board. Then we can start plugging in these cables, put this little metal panel right here, grab the Y000 bit, put those two screws in. Next you want to make sure the back is flat and make sure that nothing's poking at the battery. And what we're going to do is apply adhesive on the top right here and adhesive on the bottom right here. And we're just going to plug in the battery and set it down in the phone. If everything looks good, unplug the battery and continue on with the repair. In this situation, we are replacing the screen, so I'm just going to speed through that. And what we're going to do is apply new adhesive, even though I don't think that this phone's going to be water resistant anymore. Even though it pretty much never was once it got cracked. But either way, we're going to plug in this top cable. And then we're going to put this little metal panel on there, as well as both of these Y000 screws. Then we're going to plug in the home button flex, as well as the LCD flex. And then we can plug in the battery. Then we're going to grab the PH000 bit, as well as that little metal panel, and put that panel on there, and those 4 screws. Then all we're going to do is set down the screen. I recommend starting with the top, and then the right and left side, and then finally the bottom. And once everything's flat, we can put in the bottom 2 screws with that P2 driver, and then power on and test the phone. And it looks like everything's working, including the camera and everything. So all you got to do is clean up the adhesive on the edges, and you should be good. Hopefully this video helped you out. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section, or message me on Twitter. I get bored over there. And feel free to follow me on the social media listed above. Subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos like this, as well as some other repair and review videos. And hit that bell button so then YouTube reminds you when those videos do come out. Thanks for watching.